chat. Um, I will have time for questions at the end. Hopefully we'll be answering all your questions as we go through the session, but feel free to use the chat or to raise your hand, and I can also call on folks as well. This is meant to be just a brief introduction to how finances work for study abroad. So some of you might have attended yesterday's session, Study Abroad Express. That's kind of a general overview about the process and how the applications work, how students can start exploring study abroad opportunities. And this is kind of going to focus in more on the financial piece of that. So from the Office of Study Abroad, this is our team. We have 4 folks in our office, 3 of whom advise students, and Erica, who keeps the office running from behind the scenes. And we also have about 10 student workers, study abroad ambassadors, students who have been abroad, who work for our office when they return and help students through all stages of the process, getting prepared to go, budgeting, being a support system while they're abroad and when they return. So that is our office. And then I'm also joined by Rahel. And Rahel, I don't know if you want to unmute now and introduce yourself and your office.
Yeah, so my name is Rahel Otu, and I'm the Senior Assistant Director of Financial Aid. I also manage the Study Abroad program in the office, and then also the Summer Aid program. Thank you again for inviting me.
Yeah. So Rahel will come back a bit later, but we'll start off with just kind of the mission of study abroad, which I think fits in with the way that we kind of approach academics and finances and the financial model that we have at Brandeis. So I won't read the whole thing, it's pretty long, but the basic gist of it and the most important things are that we as an office and as a university believe and actively promote the idea that a student should not be restricted from any opportunity, particularly for study abroad, based on their identity, their financial background, what they are studying. None of those should be barriers to the educational experience, and that includes the study abroad experience. So today, here are things that we're going to kind of go through. So we'll talk about how the summer study abroad billing works, how it works for semester and academic year, a little bit more about scholarships, and then a bit about how financial aid can travel with students when they study abroad. So we'll start with the summer process. So for students who study abroad during the summer, generally they're studying on shorter term programs, so between 6 and 8 weeks. For these programs, generally students will pay the cost of the program directly to the provider. So Brandeis works with other US-based or international-based programs and organizations that kind of organize the on-the-ground experience for the students, academics, housing, experiential, all of that stuff. So those programs will charge a tuition fee, generally a room and board fee, and students will pay that for the summer directly to the program. The only exception to this are Brandeis run programs. So there are 4 programs that Brandeis facilitates over the summer that go to Copenhagen, Merida, Puerto Rico, and Siena. And because those programs are run through our office, generally with our staff and our faculty, those costs are charged to the student by Brandeis and are paid to Brandeis. For students doing an outside summer program, so any kind of affiliated program that we approve, there is a $400 study abroad fee that is put on their Brandeis account. That is for transfer credit fees, administrative fees, advising, things like that. For summer, generally, financial aid does not transfer. There are some exceptions to this. So for students who are receiving a Pell Grant, there's often the option to use part of your Pell Grant towards a summer study abroad experience. But we'll talk to students a lot about scholarships available instead of study abroad or instead of financial aid for the summer. Some of those scholarships, which we'll dive more into later, include national scholarships. So something like the Gilman or the Fund for Education Abroad are scholarships that are usually fairly competitive, but Brandeis students tend to do really well in the process, and that can help students to earn between $2,000 and $4,000 generally for a summer experience. There's also the SACR Study Abroad scholarships, which can be a little more limited, but those are distributed through our office and can go to summer study abroad students as well as semester students. As of right now, the average summer program cost tends to be between $8,000 and $9,000, depending on where the student is going. And that usually includes tuition and housing. Depending on the program, students might be living in apartment style housing where they're expected to buy groceries and cook their own food, or they might be living with homestay families. And in that case, some of their meals might be included in that fee. So this varies wildly depending on the program. And because we have so many different programs that we work with, it's going to look a little bit different on each program. So we'll work with students to help them get the best picture of what their summer expenses are going to look like and how we can help with budgeting for that. A lot of students at Brandeis will choose to go abroad for the semester or even for the academic year. And so when we talk to them about the kinds of fees they can expect, it tends to be in three kind of different categories. So there's the Brandeis charges that are going to go on your Brandeis bill and be paid normally as they would for a normal semester. There are charges from the study abroad program itself. And then there are also the personal fees and what students feel like they want to participate in during the semester, what their personal spending is on campus versus what they envision it being abroad, things like that. So for a semester abroad, students will receive their Brandeis bill as normal, and it will include the Brandeis University tuition and required student fees. This is so that students' financial aid and scholarships can go with them when they study abroad. So that's the reason for this policy. There is additional international sickness and accident insurance that we do provide for students. This is only on the Brandeis bill if the student's program does not already have adequate coverage, and we inform students of this ahead of time and help them understand the cost of that as well. If you normally are enrolled in the Brandeis qualifying student health insurance, we would have that still on your Brandeis bill. Students do have to stay enrolled in their US-based insurance even while they study abroad. So that typically, if it's a charge that you normally pay, that will be on your bill again as well. And then you'll receive a separate bill from your study abroad program. So as you can see, we take room and board from Brandeis off of your bill since you're not going to be at Brandeis for the semester or for the year. So instead, you pay the cost of housing to the program directly. So each program will bill students for their housing. The costs, again, will vary depending on the type of housing situation, what it includes, the cost of living in the city or country that the student is going to. But generally, what shows up on this bill are room fees, potentially board fees, international insurance, if it's provided by the program instead of by Brandeis. And then occasionally there are things like a mandatory flight or additional travel that's included in the program fee that will be on that bill. One thing to note is that students will often have to put down a program deposit when they get accepted to their program in order to hold their spot. That program deposit will then get deducted from the student's housing bill. So, for example, when a student gets accepted to the DIS Copenhagen program, they will be given a certain amount of time to put down a $500 deposit, and then that will be removed from the bill later on. And then in the category of personal expenses that we talk to students about for semester and also for summer abroad, some of those things can be the flights. What is it going to cost to fly to the location and back? What do they estimate for books, for any kind of visa fees if it's relevant? Personal expenses if they want to do travel and things while they're there, any kind of immunizations they might need to get beforehand. So these are the costs that can vary quite a bit depending on the students' preferences, where they're going. And often the programs that they're going on will have pretty detailed budget sheets and information on their website to give an estimate of what students have spent in past semesters so they can better understand what people usually spend on flights or books for that place. So this is just a screenshot of one of the pages on our website where we've kind of shown the comparison between costs of different programs to the general Brandeis cost. So this is not going to be including any kind of scholarships or financial aid. This is just kind of like the the base fees. But you can see over on this side, Brandeis, like the regular fees for tuition, housing, meals, normal estimates for a semester versus the DIS Copenhagen program. And so you'll see here that housing is a bit more expensive in Copenhagen. Meals might be a little less though. And then the total costs, because of the cost of living and the program, tend to be slightly above average than the cost at Brandeis. These are based on sort of like median housing estimates and meal estimates. So your student or you may be paying a different amount for housing at Brandeis and meals, but this is kind of the general basis that we use. And then you'll see over here something like a program in Yucatan in Mexico. Their meals are included in their housing. The housing is a few $1,000s less than Brandeis. And so you'll see that just baseline for the semester, students can expect to spend generally a little less money in that program than they would at a normal semester at Brandeis. In terms of scholarships, so students have a lot of questions about whether there are additional scholarships for study abroad, and there definitely are. They're in a lot of different places, and there's a lot of different pools of funding, and one of my favorite parts of this job is finding the money and helping match students with the best scholarship options for them. For those of you who are students and who are looking into some of these scholarships further, I am doing another session at 3 o'clock today on kind of the nitty-gritty of how to apply to these scholarships, essays, things like that. So feel free to join that as well. But here's some of the like big scholarships that we usually talk to students about. So the first one is the SACR Study Abroad Scholarships, and I mentioned that during the summer section. So those are for any student on any kind of financial aid for semester or summer or academic year. There's no additional application for it, so it's automatically part of the Brandeis Study Abroad application. Students just have to check a mark or like check a box that says that they do want to be considered for the scholarship, and then they are. There are also tons of scholarships through students' programs themselves, and those can be merit-based, need-based. They could be for specific identity groups. So we'll see study abroad scholarships specifically for first-generation students, students of color, LGBTQ students. We'll also see destination-specific scholarships, so grants for students doing research in Latin America or in the Middle East. There are also ones specifically related to your program or to what students are studying. And this QR code will bring you to the list of all of the scholarships that we've tried to compile from across the country and the world that are related to study abroad. So we tried to put them all on one like calendar, one website, so that students have easy access to it. And we help students kind of figure out what the timeline is for those as they go through the process. Another one I do want to shout out is the Gilman Scholarship. So for any students who are Pell eligible or who are dependents of active duty military members, this is one of the more rigorous application programs, but also one of the more rewarding ones in terms of just the number of or the amount of funding that they provide, and also the access that they provide after the program to alumni networks, interesting jobs related to the State Department, things like that. So the Gilman Scholarship tends to be a big one that students are really interested in applying for. And the deadlines for those will vary depending on when a student is studying abroad. So for anyone thinking about going abroad this coming summer or fall 2024 or for next academic year, now is going to be when we start to talk about getting those applications together. The earliest deadlines for those students will be early February and throughout February and into March. For those of you thinking about studying abroad in spring 2025 or beyond, you can apply to some scholarships now, but there will also be another chance for you to apply in the fall. So again, this QR code will link to the estimated deadlines for the scholarships that we recommend. And then I'm going to turn it over to Rahel to talk a little bit more about financial aid.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to cover the financial aid aspect of studying abroad. Going to the next slide. Thank you, sorry. So if you receive financial aid and if you receive need-based aid like the Alumni Friends Scholarship or the MLK Scholarship, you're able to use these awards to cover your study abroad expenses. If you also receive merit-based scholarship like the Presidential Scholarship, the Dean Scholarship, if you're policy student, and you receive the policy scholarship, you're able to use it as well, or the Dean's Award as well. So what we do is that we tell students that, you still get charged the Brandeis tuition and fees. So we apply your financial aid toward your Brandeis tuition and fees expenses. And then in some cases, depending on, how much you're receiving for financial aid or for the merit scholarship, you might end up owing to Brandeis, or in some cases, you might not end up owing anything, or may be eligible to receive a refund that you could use to cover direct costs to the program, like the room and board. Also, when we meet with students, we inform them that we have to create a cost of attendance or a budget for them. So the cost of attendance includes the Brandeis tuition and fees. It also includes room and board that you'll be charged by the program. We also include your airfare costs, local transportation, personal expenses, visa, and passports. Some cases, your financial aid could be adjusted based on the cost of attendance. Let's say, for instance, it is lower than the Brandeis on-campus budget for one term, your financial aid could be adjusted. And then there's some cases where it could be higher than the Brandeis on-campus budget. So in that case, your financial aid would remain the same. If you are a recipient of the federal work study, because when you're studying abroad, you're not able to work on work study jobs, you see a reduction to your federal work study. Like, for instance, if you're studying abroad in the fall, you'd see that your federal work study is zeroed for the fall term. If it's for the spring term, it would be the spring term zeroed. Or if it's for the full year, you see a zero federal work study on your revised aid letter. We always send out a revised aid letter when we make adjustments to your financial packages. And we also encourage you to meet with us if you have any questions. So we also include federal and state scholarships, grants, and loans. So if you are a recipient of the federal Pell Grant, the FSCOG, which is the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grants, we are able to include it as a financial package. We also include state programs, state grants like the MAS grants, like the Gilbert grants. We also include the MAS grants as well. If you also receive tuition remission, we include that as well. You're able to use the Stafford loans, Perkins loans, the no interest loan, the Brandeis loans and the Saval loans, the Parents Plus loans, also other private loans as well, student and parent private loans as well. So we try to make sure that you are aware of, your overall expenses, but then also what you can use to reduce the cost. And then there are some awards that you're not able to use for studying abroad expenses. So the Malkin Scholarship, the Slipka Scholarship, unfortunately, you will not be able to use those scholarships to cover the study abroad expenses. For the Wayne Scholarship, you would be able to, but you have to meet with us so we can look at your cost of attendance because it cannot exceed your Brandeis charges. So it's imperative that you schedule an appointment with us so we can definitely go over everything, because we don't want students to be surprised when they get their bill and then they're worried that they're not able to afford. We don't want that to happen. So we believe that meeting with us and for us to be transparent with you would help both you and us as well. And then we also have VA benefits, some that can be applied to certain programs. We have a colleague who handles or manages the VA program. So we definitely communicate with them in terms of, what benefits you'll be able to use to cover your study abroad expenses.
I can take it back from here, Rahel, if you want. But thank you for that. In the interest of being transparent, we have lots of resources on our website, so feel free to peruse those if you go to our main page, brandeis.edu/abroad. In the sidebar, you'll click on First Steps and then Financial Overview. This goes through all of this in even more detail, has the scholarships pages, has more financial frequently asked questions, things like that. And then there are budget worksheets, which we'll take a look at in a second, but those are something that students are now required to fill out as part of their study abroad application, in order to make sure that they're understanding how their financial aid will transfer, what the costs are potentially for the programs that they're looking into, and how all of that is going to work. So we'll take a look at that. And then, as Rahel said, like, you are always welcome to meet with either your student financial services counselor or first with study abroad at any stage in the process, whether you've started an application or whether you're just looking into study abroad for the first time, and we can help you kind of plan in advance. So this is a copy of the budget worksheet that students are filling out. So they'll get a copy of this when they start a study abroad application or when they decide on a program. But if you would like a sample one just for your own records or to play around with, please feel free to email us and we're happy to share one with you. But you'll see it's set up pretty similar to the website in terms of listing the average Brandeis expenses, and then anything in yellow students can fill in themselves. So we will have them put in for their study abroad program what the room and board estimates are, program insurance, airfare, all of that. And so it will keep a tally of the expenses for students. And then for anyone who is on any kind of financial aid or has scholarships, they can chat with their student financial services counselor or go to one of Rahel's upcoming workshops. And they will be able to help you fill in the green part to show what are your scholarships right now and what does that look like in terms of what you're paying on campus. And then what is it going to look like when you study abroad? And then at the bottom, you'll be able to calculate, or it'll automatically calculate for you, the total out-of-pocket expenses. And then using that, we can kind of know what would be the most sense in terms of helping you apply for additional scholarships to help defray that cost, or, you know, things like that, and going from there. So this is something that all students who are applying for next year will have to do by March 1st. But again, if anyone wants to take a look at it in advance, it's nice to just have a copy of that. There is also a video on how to fill it out. So the QR code here links to that. And again, these are the SFS counselors and the team. They split their advising by last name, as do we in study abroad. So these are who to reach out to if you want to have individual conversations about your financial aid situation. And then next steps, if you have not already met with a study abroad advisor, but you're interested in going abroad anytime next year, please feel free to schedule an appointment today with any of us. Start researching programs that look interesting to you, seeing what scholarships are out there. And then the next step will be having an appointment with us to kind of get started on the materials. Again, the deadline for summer, fall, and spring of next year is March 1st, so coming up quick. And then I will go through some questions now and see. Okay. So had some questions about how to access previous recordings. So if you were registered for yesterday's Study Abroad Express general info session, you will get the recording of that as well. If you are not registered or were not registered for that, if you want to register for this evening's, even if you can't attend, we'll send out the recording afterwards to anyone who was registered. And then same with this session, anyone who is on the call today or who registered initially for this session will also get a copy of these slides and a copy of the recording. There's a question about programs taking care of housing and food. So oftentimes what we find is that most or almost all of our programs have housing included as part of the program. So students live in program housing with other students who are on the program. It's organized by the program itself. There are a few exceptions to this with some of the exchange partners that we have. But most students do not have to find their own housing. Food wise, a lot of the programs we work with do not have more formal meal plans. A lot of students who go to schools abroad, particularly in Europe, are living in apartment style housing. And so they have access to a kitchen, but it's not part of the culture that students are generally eating 3 meals a day in a dining hall. So a lot of times food is one of those things that is not necessarily included, but that we work into the budget for students. Okay, the website doesn't have the budget worksheet. Yes, we just switched over to doing them individually for folks. So if you want a copy of it, please feel free to email us abroad@brandeis.edu, and I'll put that in a chat in a minute. All right. And then there's a question about financial aid. So if the program is more expensive or indirect costs are estimated to be higher, is it possible to receive more financial aid through alumni and friends? Or Hal, do you want to help out with that one?
So if the costs are higher than the Brandeis on campus, we don't increase the financial aid, the Alumni Friends Grant. However, you can appeal your financial aid. So that is separate from, appealing your financial aid and indicating to us that, your EFC, your estimated family contribution is actually higher than what you can, it's doesn't really reflect your current financial situation. So there's a process for our appeals, then using the cost of attendance for study abroad to receive more aid. The only time we would use the cost of attendance to increase your financial aid is if we have reduced it because of the study abroad program. And then you provide us with documentation confirming that, you actually spent more than what the program indicated to us. That is different from, appealing your financial aid. So we always encourage students to reach out to us if you're not sure, if it will be an appeal or if it's just reinstating financial aid that was reduced due to the study abroad budget.
And I'll say from our end, what we see, if the program looks like it's going to be more expensive, then that's when we'll start looking into additional scholarships as well and saying, okay, well, it looks like you're going to this program, DIS Copenhagen, that is a little more expensive, has a higher cost of living, but that program also has really generous scholarships that usually award $2,000 to $3,000 for a semester. So helping students kind of figure out the balance there and defray those costs too. Okay, if the program has its own insurance included, we do not need to buy the one that Brandeis offers. So correct, you do not need the additional study abroad insurance that Brandeis offers if your program has its own insurance. Either way, you always have to keep whatever US-based insurance you have during your program. All right. Okay, a rough estimate on cost of housing and meals for study abroad programs in the UK and Western Europe. So I would say probably closer to the DIS Copenhagen costs. So the UK tends to be around the same cost of living as Copenhagen. So I think those costs on our website are probably a good estimate. But individual programs are going to be very different. And with over 200 programs approved, when we start to look into programs more specifically, that's when we can get a better idea. Great questions, all of these. Okay, switching to the chat. If you receive study abroad specific scholarships that already have merit and need-based aid, won't it be reduced by that amount anyway? So that's a good point. If you do receive any kind of study abroad specific scholarships, we do report those to Student Financial Services, and they do take that into account when they're calculating the aid package. I don't know if you have any more to say about that, Rahel.
Yeah, so when we also work on the budget for students, we also calculate how much we can post for scholarships before it starts to impact your financial aid. And that's, something that you need to know because there are some students who may apply for more, there's nothing wrong with applying for scholarships, but it's also good to know, how much can we post before we have to reduce maybe like your Stafford loan and then the Alumni Friends grant. So we always make sure that students are aware of the amount that we can post for outside scholarships.
Yeah, so we'll often have students who will come see us after meeting with Student Financial Services and say, okay, I have $2,000 of wiggle room. So they'll apply for some scholarships, but maybe not some of the bigger ones. And so we'll help kind of strategize around that as well. Okay, next question. If the semester abroad program is less than Brandeis tuition, we still need to pay Brandeis tuition and fees. Is that correct? Yes, that is correct. So students stay enrolled at Brandeis while they are abroad. They're still a full-time Brandeis student. So you do pay tuition and required student fees. And then a question about the Posse Scholarship. Yes, if you are a Posse Scholar and you receive the scholarship off of your tuition for coming to Brandeis, then that means it will apply the same way when you study abroad for a semester or for a year. Summer is a little bit different. Posse does not apply to the summer programs, but it will still count for your semester, and we can dive deeper into how that will look for you individually too. Awesome. Anyone else? Yes, and great question. You don't pay tuition to the program, you just pay the housing costs. So tuition just comes to Brandeis, housing just goes to the program. Do not have to pay double tuition for sure. Awesome. Wonderful. Well, we don't have more questions. I will go ahead and just pull up registration for our other sessions, in case folks didn't get those, and I'll stick those in the chat. Easiest to do this. Right. So again, we have the scholarship application workshop this afternoon, and that will be at this link. And then tonight we have one more session of Study Abroad Express, the general info session. And there's the link to register for that one. And everyone, again, who registers will be getting copies of the session. So thank you all so much for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time, and we hope to work with you soon.
Excuse me, I'm not sure if the link works that you just posted. I just clicked on it and it didn't get me anywhere.
Okay. Was it the Study Abroad Express link or the scholarship workshop link?
I think it was a scholarship. I just clicked on the first one.
Yeah, okay. Let me pull it up again. So the scholarship application workshop this afternoon will be for students in order to help them work more on the essays and things like that. So here,
so it means that students would have received it already, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. And then and I'm also signed up for tonight at 8 p.m., which is
perfect
for parents, right?
Yes, exactly.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks so much, Renata.
Thank you.